12 years ago, on a chilly October night, when storm clouds gathered over Albuquerque's Sandia Mountains, 24-year-old Jacob Martinez clocked out of his restaurant job and vanished into the desert darkness. His Honda Civic disappeared with him, leaving only a 5-minute gap in cell phone data and a mother's unending vigil. Police suspected foul play immediately. Good kids don't just evaporate during a 15-minute drive home. But in 2012, technology had limits. Witnesses were scarce. The investigation hit concrete walls. Yet Maria Martinez never surrendered hope, lighting a candle in her window every single night for 12 years. Then advanced GPS data recovery changed everything, revealing Jacob's final route and exposing a betrayal that would shatter Albuquerque's tight-knit community forever. Before we dive into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe. October 15, 2012, the high desert air of Albuquerque carried an unusual chill as storm clouds gathered over the Sandia Mountains like dark omens. At La Cocina Familiar, a beloved Mexican restaurant on Central Avenue, warm amber light spilled onto empty sidewalks slick with the promise of rain. Inside, the dinner rush was winding down, with mariachi music playing softly from speakers as staff wiped down tables and counted the night's tips. The scent of green chili and fresh tortillas lingered in the air, mixing with the anticipation of an approaching storm. Jacob Martinez moved between tables with practiced ease, his infectious smile earning him regular customers who specifically requested his section. At 24, he possessed that rare combination of genuine warmth and professional competence that made dining feel like visiting family. The youngest of Maria Martinez's 3 children, Jacob had worked at La Cocina for 2 years while finishing his business degree at the University of New Mexico. His mother, an elementary school teacher with calloused hands and unwavering faith, often stopped by for dinner just to watch him work, pride radiating from her dark eyes. That evening, she'd been there earlier, leaving with a to-go box of pozole and Jacob's promise to stop by her house in the morning for their traditional coffee and planning session. The night stretched longer than usual. A large party celebrating a quinceañera had lingered over flan and sopapillas, their laughter echoing off the restaurant's adobe walls, decorated with hand-painted murals of old Mexico. Jacob didn't mind. He enjoyed the energy of celebration, and the extra tips would help with his upcoming tuition payment. Security footage would later show him helping close the restaurant at 10:30 p.m., joking with head cook Miguel Sandoval as they secured the kitchen and counted registers. The grainy black and white images captured Jacob's easy demeanor and his genuine laugh as Miguel teased him about his girlfriend Sarah. He was talking about his midterms, Miguel Sandoval would later tell detectives, his voice thick with emotion. He said he had a big presentation Wednesday about restaurant management. Kid was always planning ahead, always had his whole life together, mapped out like one of those business plans he studied. Jacob walked to his 2008 Honda Civic, parked under a flickering streetlight in the employee section behind the restaurant. The car, silver with a small dent in the rear bumper from a parking lot mishap, represented independence earned through countless double shifts and weekend work. He slid behind the wheel, adjusting his rearview mirror, a habit his father had drilled into him during driving lessons years before. His phone glowed as he typed a quick message to Sarah. Heading home. Love you. The timestamp would later prove crucial. His route home to his apartment near Old Town typically took 15 minutes down Central Avenue, past the University of New Mexico campus, and through neighborhoods he'd known since childhood, when his grandmother lived in the same area. The restaurant's security cameras captured Jacob's departure with stark clarity. The last image shows him illuminated by his car's dome light, one hand on the steering wheel, the other reaching to shift into drive. Behind him, La Cocina's neon sign flickered red and green against the approaching storm clouds that had swallowed the stars. Thunder rumbled in the distance as his Honda pulled onto Central Avenue, disappearing into a night that would stretch into 12 years of questions. Jacob's cell phone faithfully pinged off towers along Central Avenue until 10:52 p.m., its signal consistent with his normal route home. The towers tracked his progress past familiar landmarks. The old Route 66 motels with their vintage signs, the university area with its mix of student housing and local businesses, and the gradually narrowing road that led toward Old Town's historic plaza. Then, in a span that would haunt investigators for over a decade, the signal simply vanished. Between the university area and Old Town, along a stretch of road with sparse lighting and few businesses open at that late hour, Jacob Martinez and his Honda Civic entered a void that would swallow them completely. By dawn, that absence would trigger a massive search effort that would consume the community, strain police resources, and ultimately reveal the darkest secrets hiding in plain sight within Albuquerque's close-knit neighborhoods. October 16, 2012, 6:00 a.m., Maria Martinez stood on her son's apartment doorstep as the first light of dawn painted the Sandia Mountains soft pink and gold. The storm had passed during the night, leaving the air crisp and clean, carrying the earthy scent of wet sage and piñon from nearby homes where early risers had already lit their fireplaces. Birds chirped obliviously in the cottonwoods as Maria's carefully ordered world began to crumble around her. Jacob's roommate, David Chen, Sarah's older brother who'd helped Jacob find the apartment, answered the door in rumpled pajamas, his hair sticking up at odd angles. His confusion quickly shifted to concern when he confirmed what Maria's mother's intuition had already told her. Jacob never came home. The apartment felt wrong somehow, too quiet, too still. Jacob's bed remained made, his textbooks still spread across the small dining table where he'd been studying the night before his shift. His work shoes sat by the door, waiting for feet that would never fill them again. Detective Ray Gonzalez, a 20-year veteran of the Albuquerque Police Department with graying temples and eyes that had seen too much, took Maria's missing person report at 7:15 a.m. in the sterile environment of APD headquarters. His weathered hands moved efficiently across forms, while Maria's shook as she provided details no mother should have to recite. Jacob's height, weight, identifying marks, last known clothing, and vehicle description, each detail felt like another nail in a coffin she refused to acknowledge. Sarah Chen was in her University of New Mexico dorm room, surrounded by psychology textbooks and the detritus of college life, when Maria's call shattered her morning routine. She hadn't worried when Jacob didn't send his usual goodnight text. He sometimes fell asleep watching late-night television after long shifts, exhaustion overtaking his usual habits. Now, staring at her phone's blank screen, she felt physically ill, her stomach churning with a dread that seemed to emanate from her very bones. The first 24 hours unfolded with the mechanical precision of a well-rehearsed emergency protocol, each passing hour adding weight to the growing certainty that something terrible had happened. Jacob's Honda Civic wasn't at his apartment complex, the restaurant parking lot, or any of his usual haunts. The university library where he studied, the gym where he maintained his server's stamina, or the coffee shop near campus where he and Sarah spent lazy Sunday mornings. His bank cards remained untouched, his modest checking account showing no activity since a gas purchase the previous afternoon. His phone went straight to voicemail, the cheerful recorded message becoming increasingly ominous with each unanswered call. Detective Gonzalez initially maintained professional skepticism. Young men sometimes needed space and sometimes made impulsive decisions that seemed rational only to them, but Jacob's employment record showed perfect attendance. His academic transcript revealed a student weeks away from graduation, and his relationship with Sarah appeared stable and loving. Nothing in his background suggested someone prone to sudden departures or dramatic gestures. By noon, patrol units were methodically checking hospitals, accident sites, and known trouble spots along Central Avenue, their radios crackling with negative reports that gradually built a picture of complete absence. "This isn't like him," Sarah told detectives, her voice small and frightened as she clutched Jacob's University of New Mexico ID card like a talisman. "We had plans this weekend. We were going to drive up to Santa Fe, maybe look at apartments for after graduation. His sister's birthday is Thursday. He bought her present 2 weeks ago. It's wrapped on his desk, ready to mail." Cell phone records provided the investigation's first concrete timeline. Jacob's phone had pinged off towers with mechanical regularity, creating a digital breadcrumb trail that followed his expected route home. The last ping registered at 10:52 p.m., near the intersection of Central Avenue and Girard Boulevard, in the heart of the university area where students walk between bars and late-night diners. After that, digital silence. Detectives mapped search radii based on driving time and fuel levels, noting that Jacob's car had contained approximately half a tank of gas, enough for roughly 150 miles of driving, a fact that expanded the potential search area exponentially. Maria's desperation intensified with each passing hour, manifesting in frantic action that bordered on manic. She called every hospital between Albuquerque and Santa Fe, her voice growing hoarse as she spelled Jacob's name repeatedly to intake clerks and emergency room staff. She drove his route obsessively, stopping at every parking lot, every side street, and every place where a car might be hidden or abandoned. Her eyes scanned constantly, searching for that familiar silver Honda, for any sign that her son had simply experienced car trouble and was waiting for help that never came. "I kept thinking I'd see his car," she would later tell investigators, her voice breaking, that he'd pulled over with mechanical problems and fallen asleep waiting for morning. "I kept imagining him waking up confused, wondering why I was crying when he tried to call." Missing person flyers began appearing throughout the city, like a rash of grief. Jacob's smiling face, reproduced in stark black and white, looked out from telephone poles, grocery store bulletin boards, and campus message centers. The photograph, taken at his sister Anna's wedding the previous spring, showed him in a rented tuxedo, looking directly at the camera with warm brown eyes that seemed to hold promises he would never be able to keep. As the golden hour light faded into another cold desert night, casting long shadows across the search areas, the investigation expanded beyond routine missing person protocols into the realm of serious criminal inquiry, though no one yet dared speak aloud what everyone feared. October 17th through 24th, 2012. The Albuquerque Police Department headquarters, transformed into a war room, its normally quiet corridors buzzing with the urgent energy of a major case. Conference room walls disappeared beneath layers of maps marked with red pins, timeline charts tracking Jacob's last known movements, and witness statements that painted a picture of a young man with no enemies and no secrets. Outside, autumn winds scattered yellow cottonwood leaves across search areas like nature's own confetti, mocking the gravity of the situation with seasonal beauty. Search coordinator Linda Ramirez, a veteran of the state's emergency management office with silver hair and steel determination, organized over 200 volunteers who gathered each morning at La Cocina Familiar. The restaurant's parking lot became an impromptu command center, filled with pickup trucks, SUVs, and sedans as residents arrived carrying water bottles, hiking boots, and grim determination. Jacob's older sister, Anna, flew in from Denver, taking immediate charge of social media efforts with the focused intensity of someone channeling grief into action. Restaurant owner Carlos Mendoza, a second-generation businessman whose father had opened La Cocina in 1987, offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to Jacob's whereabouts, the money representing a significant portion of the family restaurant's annual profit. Even regular customers joined the search efforts, their loyalty extending beyond shared meals into genuine concern for a young man who had served them with consistent kindness. Tom Bradley, a 68-year-old retired contractor who ate at Jacob's section every Friday after his wife died, emerged as an unexpected leader, his construction background proving invaluable for organizing systematic searches of difficult terrain. Search teams methodically covered a 20-mile radius from Jacob's last known location, their bright orange safety vests, visible against the high desert landscape, like scattered marigolds. They checked arroyos where vehicles might have crashed and remained hidden, abandoned buildings that dotted Albuquerque's outskirts, and parking structures in shopping centers and business districts. Helicopters flew precise grid patterns over the bosque, the cottonwood forest along the Rio Grande where bodies and evidence often surfaced after crimes. Professional divers searched the murky waters of the Rio Grande itself, their equipment cutting through currents that had carried secrets for centuries. K-9 units tracked scent trails that led nowhere, the dogs following invisible paths that ended abruptly at street corners or parking lots, their confusion mirroring the human frustration. German shepherds trained in cadaver detection worked abandoned lots and construction sites, their sensitive noses searching for traces of decay that thankfully never materialized during those first crucial weeks. Detectives conducted over 60 interviews, systematically examining every aspect of Jacob's life with the thoroughness of archaeologists, uncovering an ancient civilization. They spoke with coworkers who described him as reliable and cheerful, classmates who remembered his study groups and group projects, and professors who noted his consistent attendance and thoughtful participation. Ex-girlfriends from high school described amicable breakups and continued friendships. Teammates from intramural soccer recalled his competitive spirit and good sportsmanship. They examined Jacob's laptop with forensic software, finding nothing more suspicious than Netflix viewing history and assignment drafts. His social media accounts revealed a typical young adult's online presence: photos with friends, check-ins at restaurants and events, and political posts about student loan reform and environmental protection. His financial records showed the careful budgeting of a college student working his way through school, with regular deposits from La Cocina and disciplined spending that avoided unnecessary debt. "We're treating this as a missing person case, with suspicious circumstances," Detective Gonzalez told assembled media outside APD headquarters, his gray suit wrinkled from long hours, and his voice carrying the weight of genuine concern. "We need anyone who was on Central Avenue between 10:30 and 11 p.m. on October 15th to come forward, even if they don't think they saw anything significant. Sometimes the smallest detail breaks a case wide open." Traffic cameras along Central Avenue provided limited coverage in 2012. The city's surveillance network was still years away from the comprehensive coverage that would later blanket major thoroughfares. The few functioning cameras showed no sign of Jacob's silver Honda Civic, their grainy footage revealing only the normal late-night traffic of delivery trucks, taxicabs, and other restaurant workers heading home after long shifts. Detectives created detailed timeline matrices, plotting every confirmed sighting against cell tower data, searching for patterns or anomalies that might explain the impossible. The 5-minute gap between Jacob's last cell phone ping at 10:52 p.m. and what should have been his arrival home at 10:57 p.m. became the investigation's focal point. Somewhere in that narrow window of time, on a stretch of Central Avenue that thousands of people traveled daily, Jacob Martinez and his Honda Civic had simply vanished, as completely as if they had never existed. Maria Martinez, aged visibly during these first critical days, her face growing gaunt as she survived on coffee, adrenaline, and the determination that only a mother's love can provide. She stopped eating regular meals, unable to taste food when her son's fate remained unknown. Sleep became impossible, replaced by restless pacing and obsessive checking of her phone for updates that never came. "Every time the phone rang, my heart stopped," she confided to Father Miguel Chavez during one of their daily meetings at St. Joseph's Catholic Church. "I wanted it to be Jacob calling to explain everything. I was terrified it would be Detective Gonzalez, with the news that would destroy my world forever." Search parties spread across Albuquerque's diverse landscape, like determined ants, their bright safety vests visible against tan earth, green bosque, and gray urban concrete. Missing person posters fluttered from every available surface: grocery store windows, gas station bulletin boards, campus buildings, and community centers. Jacob's face became as familiar as a family member to thousands of residents who had never met him but felt compelled to help find him. Despite the massive effort, the overwhelming community support, and the dedication of both professional investigators and volunteer searchers, each day ended with the same crushing result: no new leads, no evidence, no sign of Jacob Martinez or his silver Honda Civic. The investigation was approaching an inevitable crossroads where hope would have to confront the brutal mathematics of time and probability. Late October 20, Albuquerque's tight-knit Hispanic community rallied around the Martinez family with the fierce loyalty that defined generations of families who had built lives in the high desert. St. Joseph's Catholic Church on 4th Street, with its adobe walls and wooden pews worn smooth by decades of prayer, became an unofficial headquarters for the search effort. Candlelight vigils drew hundreds each night, their flames flickering like stars against the desert wind, creating rivers of light that flowed through Old Town Plaza and beyond. Father Miguel Chavez, a soft-spoken priest with calloused hands from his previous life as a carpenter, provided spiritual support while organizing meal trains that kept the Martinez family fed during their darkest hours. City Councilwoman Elena Vasquez, herself a mother of three, pressured APD for additional resources and overtime funding, her political influence leveraged entirely for a family she'd never met but whose pain she understood instinctively. Tom Bradley, the retired contractor who had become Maria's unexpected ally, used his extensive construction contacts to search properties throughout the metro area, his weathered pickup truck becoming a familiar sight at job sites and vacant lots. Local gang intervention specialist Marcus Williams, whose work bridging law enforcement and street communities had earned respect on both sides, personally vouched that Jacob had no gang connections, eliminating one potential avenue of investigation while emphasizing the randomness of his disappearance. Kid was clean, Williams told detectives during a lengthy interview. No debts, no enemies, no involvement with anything street-related. Whatever happened to him, it wasn't gang business. Tips flooded the dedicated hotline. With the relentless persistence of desert rain, over 400 calls in the first week alone, each one meticulously logged and investigated by detectives who understood that solving cases often required sorting through mountains of well-meaning but ultimately useless information. A convenience store clerk thought he'd seen Jacob's car heading south on Interstate 25 toward Santa Fe, but security footage from the location showed no such vehicle. A long-haul trucker reported a similar Honda abandoned near Belen, 30 miles south of Albuquerque, but the abandoned car proved to belong to a different missing person case from 6 months earlier. Psychics called, claiming visions of desert graves and hidden chambers, their predictions invariably leading search teams to empty lots and false hope. Grieving families from similar cases reached out, offering support and sharing their own stories of loved ones who had vanished without explanation. Every lead, no matter how tenuous or unlikely, received thorough investigation because detectives understood that breakthrough cases often emerged from the most unexpected sources. The community organized searches beyond official police channels, checking vacant lots where homeless camps sometimes sheltered the desperate, abandoned buildings where criminal activity might seek shadows, and anywhere a car could be hidden or a person might be held against their will. Local businesses donated bottled water, sandwiches, gasoline and printing services for flyers. Auto shops offered free vehicle inspections for search volunteers. Hotels provided discounted rooms for Anna and other out-of-town family members. La Cocina Familiar itself became a gathering place for updates and coordination, its dining room transformed into an informal command center, where maps were spread across tables usually reserved for families celebrating birthdays and anniversaries. The restaurant's atmosphere changed dramatically. Conversations grew quieter, laughter more subdued, as if the building itself mourned Jacob's absence. "This boy served my family every Friday for 2 years," Tom Bradley told assembled news reporters, his voice gruff with emotion and his construction-weathered hands gesturing toward Jacob's usual section. "He knew my grandkids' names, always asked about my wife's health problems, and remembered that I liked extra salsa verde with my enchiladas. Good kids don't just disappear into thin air. Someone out there knows something, and they need to come forward." APD's tip classification system, developed through years of major case experience, sorted incoming leads by credibility and investigative potential. Category A tips, those containing specific verifiable details that aligned with known facts, numbered only 12 in the first month. Most involved possible sightings of Jacob's Honda Civic in various locations throughout central New Mexico, but follow-up investigations consistently ruled them out through license plate verification, security footage analysis, or simple timeline impossibilities. License plate readers, still limited in their deployment across Albuquerque in 2012, showed no hits for Jacob's vehicle in their database, suggesting either that he had avoided major thoroughfares entirely or that his car had been taken somewhere beyond the system's limited coverage area. The FBI offered technical assistance, running Jacob's information through national databases that tracked everything from credit card usage to border crossings, but their sophisticated systems revealed only the same digital silence that local investigators had already discovered. Maria Martinez found unexpected strength in the overwhelming community support, her natural shyness giving way to the fierce determination that emerges when a mother's love confronts the unthinkable. "My boy touched so many lives in just 24 years, she told reporters during a particularly emotional press conference. "The love and support coming back to us from this community, it's what keeps me standing when everything inside me wants to collapse. It reminds me that Jacob's life mattered, that he made a difference, and that we can't give up until we know what happened to him." Evening vigils created rivers of candlelight that flowed through Old Town Plaza, hundreds of small flames reflecting off ancient adobe walls that had witnessed centuries of human joy and sorrow. Aerial news footage captured the community's determination, showing Maria at the center of each gathering, surrounded by supporters whose faces were illuminated by flickering light and shared grief. But as October's chill gave way to November's deeper cold, and the cottonwood trees shed their golden leaves like tears falling to earth, the harsh reality began to settle over even the most optimistic supporters. Despite overwhelming community involvement, despite hundreds of tips and thousands of volunteer hours, despite the prayers and vigils and unwavering hope, Jacob Martinez remained as missing as the moment his cell phone signal had vanished into the desert night. November 2012. The Albuquerque Police Department's Major Crimes Unit faced mounting pressure as leads evaporated like morning dew in the high desert sun. Detective Bureau's fluorescent lights burned late into countless nights, casting harsh shadows across desks covered with reports, photographs, and the accumulated debris of an investigation that seemed to generate more questions than answers. Coffee cups accumulated like archaeological layers, marking the passage of sleepless shifts. Outside headquarters, Albuquerque's first snow of the season dusted the Sandia Mountains, its pristine whiteness covering potential evidence sites with another layer of concealment. Detective Ray Gonzalez grew increasingly frustrated with the technological limitations that hampered every avenue of investigation. His weathered face, lined by 2 decades of police work, showed the strain of a case that defied conventional logic. FBI consultant agent Patricia Morris, brought in from the Violent Crime Task Force, reviewed every aspect of the investigation with fresh eyes trained by years of similar disappearances across the Southwest. Crime analyst Jennifer Park created detailed victimology profiles, searching for patterns that might explain why Jacob Martinez had been targeted, if indeed he had been targeted at all. District Attorney Robert Sanchez monitored developments with the calculating eye of a prosecutor who understood that even the most sympathetic case required evidence that could survive courtroom scrutiny. His involvement remained peripheral but constant, a reminder that finding Jacob would only be the beginning of a legal process that demanded proof beyond reasonable doubt. Every investigative theory crashed against immovable walls of absent evidence. Carjacking seemed possible, given Jacob's route through areas where such crimes occurred, but carjackers typically abandoned vehicles quickly after taking cash and valuables. They rarely made cars disappear entirely, and they never maintained the discipline required to avoid using victims' credit cards or cell phones. No evidence of struggle appeared at any location along Jacob's route, no blood or disturbed ground that might indicate violence. Random accidents seemed statistically likely. Young drivers sometimes fell asleep, sometimes swerved to avoid animals, and sometimes experienced mechanical failures that sent vehicles into ravines or hidden areas. But Albuquerque's terrain, while vast, lacked the deep canyons or dense forests where cars might remain hidden indefinitely. The high desert revealed its secrets eventually, and systematic air searches had covered every possible crash site within reasonable driving distance. Voluntary disappearance represented the theory that investigators least wanted to consider but couldn't entirely dismiss. Young adults sometimes reached breaking points, invisible to family and friends, and sometimes cracked under pressures that seemed manageable from the outside. But Jacob's history contradicted this possibility. At every turn, his academic success, employment stability, loving relationship with Sarah, close family ties, and specific future plans all argued against someone preparing to abandon his entire life. The 5-minute gap in cell phone data became an obsession that consumed Detective Gonzalez's attention and his dreams. Modern investigations relied heavily on digital breadcrumbs, credit card transactions, cell phone pings, security camera footage, GPS tracking, and social media activity. But in 2012, those digital trails remained more limited, and Jacob's trail ended with mathematical precision at 10:52 p.m., leaving investigators staring into a void that offered no clues about direction, destination, or causation. "We're not giving up," Detective Gonzalez assured Maria Martinez during a particularly difficult meeting in his office. Surrounded by case files and crime scene photographs that told stories of other families' tragedies. "But I need to be honest with you, without new evidence, without witnesses, without some kind of break in the case, we're at a standstill. We need someone to come forward with information they might not even realize is important." Forensic limitations in 2012 created additional frustrations for investigators, accustomed to the technological advantages that television shows suggested were available to every police department. Cell tower triangulation remained imprecise, providing general areas rather than specific locations. GPS data from personal cell phones wasn't automatically stored by service providers for extended periods. Traffic cameras existed sporadically rather than comprehensively. Social media presence was less pervasive, reducing the digital footprint that individuals left behind. The Honda Civic's OnStar system, which might have provided crucial tracking information, had been discontinued by Jacob 6 months earlier to save money. A perfectly reasonable decision for a cash-strapped college student that now haunted everyone involved in the investigation. That monthly service fee, less than the cost of a restaurant meal, might have solved the case within hours of Jacob's disappearance. Polygraph examinations were administered to willing subjects, including Jacob's roommate, his girlfriend Sarah, restaurant co-workers, and even Tom Bradley, the retired contractor who had become Maria's strongest supporter. Every test came back clean, eliminating potential suspects, while simultaneously removing investigative leads that might have provided direction for further inquiry. Similar cases nationwide were examined through FBI databases, searching for patterns that might connect Jacob's disappearance to serial criminals or traveling offenders. The analysis revealed dozens of missing persons cases, with surface similarities, young adults vanishing during routine activities, vehicles disappearing along with their drivers, and investigations that stalled due to absent evidence. But none showed the specific combination of circumstances that might indicate a connected series of crimes. Re-interviews pushed harder on subjects who had already been questioned extensively, searching for inconsistencies or overlooked details that might provide new leads. Detectives returned to Jacob's co-workers, his classmates, his neighbors, and anyone who might have observed something significant without recognizing its importance. The interviews yielded minor clarifications and additional character testimony, but no breakthrough information. Maria Martinez's hope began to waver as winter deepened and the investigation's momentum slowed. "The not knowing is what's killing me," she confided to Father Chavez during one of their regular counseling sessions. "Is he hurt somewhere, waiting for help? Is he scared? She never finished the sentence that haunted her thoughts, unable to voice the possibility that Jacob might be beyond help, beyond hope, beyond the reach of her mother's love. Sarah Chen struggled with survivor's guilt that manifested in obsessive self-examination. Why hadn't she worried when Jacob didn't send his usual goodnight text? Should she have called the restaurant to check on him? Could she have somehow prevented whatever had happened by being more attentive, more concerned, and more protective? Ana Martinez took extended leave from her job in Denver, unable to concentrate on corporate responsibilities while her family faced the unthinkable. The incident room that had been established for Jacob's case told the story of an investigation reaching its limits. Maps covered with red pins marked searched areas that seemed to encompass every possible location where evidence might hide. Timeline charts showed frustrating gaps where crucial information should have existed. Photographs of Jacob, taken from happier times, grew sun-faded from fluorescent lights and the passage of time. Detectives' exhaustion showed in their postures, their thousand-yard stares, and their increasing reliance on caffeine and determination to sustain them through impossibly long shifts. As the investigation officially transitioned from active to cold case status, the Martinez family faced an agonizing decision about how to move forward without answers, how to live with uncertainty, and how to hope for resolution, while preparing for the possibility that Jacob's fate might never be known. December 2012 through December 2014. The holiday season arrived with cruel irony, its celebrations and family gatherings serving as painful reminders of absence rather than joy. The Martinez home, usually brilliant with luminarias during Christmas season, sat subdued, except for a single candle that flickered nightly in the front window, Maria's unwavering ritual, a beacon calling Jacob home through the darkness. Seasons changed with their ancient rhythm, but grief remained constant, settling into the family's daily existence, like desert dust that could never be completely swept away. The high desert's harsh beauty, brilliant sunsets that painted the Sandia Mountains purple and gold, snow-capped peaks that gleamed against turquoise skies, vast spaces that promised freedom and mystery, seemed to mock their pain with its indifference. How could the world continue its cycles of beauty and renewal when Jacob remained lost somewhere in its vastness? Maria Martinez transformed from elementary school teacher to full-time advocate with the dedicated fury that only a mother's love can sustain. Her classroom, once filled with the cheerful chaos of second graders learning to read, sat empty while she channeled her teaching skills into organizing search efforts, maintaining databases of tips and leads, and connecting with families across the Southwest who shared her nightmare of missing children. Anna balanced supporting her mother with maintaining her own family responsibilities in Denver, driving the 400 miles between cities every few weeks, and her marriage straining under the weight of extended crisis. Sarah Chen graduated from the University of New Mexico with her psychology degree, but the achievement felt hollow without Jacob there to celebrate her accomplishments. She'd imagined him in the audience, cheering as she walked across the stage, proud of the woman he'd helped encourage through difficult coursework and self-doubt. Instead, she sat through the ceremony numb, his absence more present than any of the celebrating family surrounding her. Detective Ray Gonzalez moved to the cold case unit, but Jacob's file remained prominently displayed on his desk, a constant reminder of the case that had consumed months of his career and occupied permanent space in his thoughts. He knew that cold cases were solved through persistence, through new technology, through witnesses finally finding courage to speak, and through the simple passage of time that sometimes loosened tongues previously sealed by fear or loyalty. Tom Bradley, the retired contractor who had become Maria's unlikely companion, continued driving her to vigils, meetings, and memorial events, despite his advancing age and declining health. Their friendship, forged in shared grief and common purpose, provided both of them with the human connection necessary to continue fighting when logic suggested surrender. The active investigation officially transitioned to cold case status after 6 months, a bureaucratic necessity that freed resources for new crimes while maintaining Jacob's case in the department's permanent files. Resources shifted to fresh investigations with active leads and living witnesses. The dedicated tip line went quiet as community attention moved to other tragedies, other missing persons, and other families beginning their own journeys through the valley of unanswered questions. Media coverage dwindled to anniversary mentions, brief television segments, each October 15th, showing Maria Martinez lighting her window candle, newspaper articles, updating readers on the investigation's lack of progress, and radio talk shows occasionally featuring calls from listeners who remembered Jacob's case and wondered about its status. The coverage was respectful but brief, acknowledging the family's ongoing pain while recognizing that audiences grew weary of stories without resolution. Maria refused to accept her son's transition to cold case status. She created a website documenting every detail of Jacob's disappearance, updating it regularly with new theories, potential leads, and pleas for information. She printed fresh flyers quarterly, distributing them at community events, grocery stores, and college campuses. She attended every missing persons conference within 500 miles, learning about search techniques, legal procedures, and advocacy strategies, while building a network of families united by loss and determination. She learned about DNA databases, about advances in forensic technology, and about federal resources available for missing persons cases. She discovered other mothers' stories, women who had searched for decades before finding answers, women who had never found answers but never stopped searching, women whose missing children had been recovered alive after years of absence. These stories sustained her hope, while simultaneously highlighting the brutal mathematics of time and probability. Christmas 2012 proved unbearable in ways the family hadn't anticipated. Jacob's stocking hung empty on the mantelpiece, his presents wrapped beneath the tree, gifts Maria couldn't bear to return or redistribute. His bedroom remained exactly as he'd left it, university textbooks still open on his desk, his work uniform hanging clean in the closet, and his bed made with military precision from habits learned in childhood. The family attempted normal holiday traditions, but found them poisoned by absence. Christmas dinner included Jacob's place setting and his favorite foods prepared with careful attention to his preferences. Conversations stumbled around the empty chair, family members struggling to maintain celebrations that felt like elaborate pretense. Gift exchanges occurred with mechanical precision, everyone aware that the only gift they wanted, Jacob's safe return, remained beyond their reach.
People tell me to move on, to accept that he's gone.
Maria told a support group for families of missing persons, her voice steady despite the tears flowing down her cheeks. How do you accept not knowing? How do you bury a ghost? How do you plan a funeral without a body, closure without answers, and grief without resolution? My boy is somewhere, and until I know where and what happened, I'll never stop looking. The investigation file grew to over 1,200 pages, documenting every lead, every interview, and every theory pursued and abandoned. Cold case protocols required quarterly reviews, but without new evidence, those reviews became exercises in repetition, rereading the same witness statements and re-examining the same evidence, hoping that fresh eyes might catch details previously overlooked. The FBI's vigils database held Jacob's information alongside thousands of other missing persons, waiting for connections that might emerge from future crimes or recovered evidence. Private investigators, hired with Maria's teaching salary and retirement savings, found nothing that police hadn't already discovered, their expensive expertise ultimately confirming the thoroughness of the original investigation rather than uncovering new leads. Grief evolved but never diminished, changing texture and intensity while maintaining its fundamental presence in the family's daily existence. Maria developed chronic insomnia, spending nights researching missing persons cases online, studying forensic techniques, corresponding with other families, and maintaining the vigil that kept Jacob's memory alive in her heart and visible to her community. Sarah sought therapy to address survivor's guilt and the trauma of loving someone who had simply vanished. She struggled with the concept of ambiguous loss, grieving someone whose fate remained unknown, whose story lacked conclusion, and whose absence created a permanent question mark in the narrative of her young adult life. Hannah worried constantly about her mother's physical and emotional health, watching Maria age rapidly under the strain of constant worry and activism. The family attended Jacob's graduation ceremony at the University of New Mexico. His name was called to empty air while they sat in the audience honoring achievements he would never know he had earned. Time accumulated, like desert sand, burying hope deeper beneath layers of disappointment and unanswered questions, until technology that didn't exist in 2012 would offer an unexpected lifeline to an investigation that had seemingly exhausted every possible avenue of inquiry. 2015 through 2021, Albuquerque evolved around Jacob Martinez's absence, like a city growing around an ancient ruin, incorporating the missing piece into its landscape, while never quite forgetting what had once been there. New buildings rose along Central Avenue, their glass and steel facades reflecting a modernizing city. La Cocina Familiar expanded into the adjacent storefront, but Table 12, Jacob's section, remained reserved, with a small memorial plaque that regular customers touched for luck or remembrance. The university area gentrified steadily, with corporate chains replacing local haunts where Jacob had once studied and socialized, but his ghost seemed to linger in the spaces between old and new. Time moved forward with relentless persistence, But in certain hearts throughout the community, clocks had stopped at 10:52. The absence had become a permanent feature of the emotional landscape, integrated into daily routines and annual commemorations. With the acceptance that comes from enduring grief, Maria Martinez evolved into a fixture at city council meetings, her presence as regular as the morning sunrise as she advocated for improved missing persons protocols, better funding for cold case investigations, and expanded use of emerging technologies in unsolved cases. Her transformation from quiet elementary school teacher to fierce public advocate demonstrated how tragedy could forge strength from the most unexpected sources. City officials came to recognize her immediately, some inspired by her determination, others wearied by her persistent demands for action and resources. New detective Lisa Chen inherited the cold case division, bringing fresh perspective to investigations that had stalled under the weight of their own history. Her approach combined modern technological capabilities with old-fashioned investigative persistence, but Jacob's case remained as elusive as ever, its central mystery unchanged despite new analytical tools and updated forensic techniques. Tom Bradley, now in his 70s and dealing with health issues related to a lifetime of construction work, remained Maria's steadfast friend and occasional companion. Their relationship, forged in shared grief and sustained by common purpose, provided both of them with human connection during the long years when hope seemed to offer nothing but additional disappointment. His pickup truck, though older and more weathered, continued making regular appearances at memorial events and anniversary vigils. Sarah Chen married her college boyfriend in a ceremony that included an empty chair, decorated with white roses in Jacob's memory. She kept his photograph in her wallet, explaining him to new friends as her college boyfriend who had disappeared, the love story that had ended with a question mark rather than resolution. She'd moved to California for graduate school, but returned to Albuquerque every October 15th for the anniversary vigils that marked time's passage without providing answers. Miguel Sandoval, promoted to head chef at La Cocina Familiar, trained new servers with stories of Jacob's professionalism, work ethic, and genuine care for customers. These stories became part of the restaurant's culture, teaching young employees about hospitality through the example of someone they'd never met but whose influence continued shaping the establishment's character, years after his disappearance. Annual vigils continued with the persistence of desert wildflowers, blooming each October regardless of weather or attendance. The crowds gradually diminished as community attention moved to newer tragedies and more immediate concerns, but a core group of supporters maintained the tradition. Maria stood at the center of each gathering, her face more lined, but her determination undiminished, surrounded by friends and strangers united by their refusal to let Jacob's memory fade into a historical footnote. Maria established the Jacob Martinez Scholarship at the University of New Mexico, funded through her teaching salary and community donations, providing financial assistance to hospitality students who demonstrated both academic achievement and the kind of personal character Jacob had exemplified. The scholarship recipients, selected annually through a process that emphasized community service and work ethic, became living memorials to values Jacob had embodied during his brief life. She spoke at conferences throughout the Southwest, sharing her expertise about missing persons advocacy, family support systems, and the intersection of technology with cold case investigations. Her presentations, delivered with the teaching skills honed through years in elementary classrooms, educated law enforcement officials, victim advocates, and other families about the long-term impact of unresolved cases and the importance of maintaining hope through extended periods of uncertainty. The case inspired APD to upgrade its technological infrastructure, installing additional traffic cameras, improving digital evidence storage systems, and developing better protocols for cell phone data preservation. Jacob's disappearance had highlighted the limitations of 2012 technology, and his family's advocacy helped push for improvements that would benefit future investigations, even if they couldn't resolve his case retroactively. Other families found Maria through her website and advocacy work, seeking guidance as they began their own journeys through the nightmare of missing loved ones. She helped organize searches, navigate bureaucratic systems, and maintain hope during the inevitable periods when investigations stalled. Her home became an informal resource center, filled with files, maps, and contact information for experts in various aspects of missing persons cases. False hopes arose periodically. Bodies discovered in remote areas were quickly ruled out through dental records or DNA analysis. Each disappointment carved deeper grooves in Maria's face, but also seemed to strengthen her resolve. She understood that most missing persons cases ended tragically, but she also knew that some families eventually found answers, and that possibility sustained her through the darkest periods of doubt and despair. 7 years, and I still set his place at Christmas dinner, Maria told a documentary filmmaker in 2019, sitting in her living room where Jacob's high school graduation photo occupied a place of honor on the mantelpiece. Hope is cruel sometimes, but it's all I have. Somewhere out there, someone knows what happened to my boy. Someday they'll find the courage to tell the truth. Technology continued advancing during the years of silence, creating new possibilities for cold case resolution that hadn't existed during the original investigation. DNA databases expanded exponentially. Genealogical services provided new avenues for identifying unknown remains. Cell phone tracking became more sophisticated, and social media created digital archives of human behavior that could be analyzed years after the fact. Digital forensics evolved rapidly, providing investigators with tools that could extract information from devices and systems that had seemed permanently silent. GPS data that had been considered irretrievable in 2012 became accessible through advanced recovery techniques. Cloud storage systems preserved information that users thought had been deleted. These technological advances offered hope to cold case investigators, though they required new evidence or witnesses to provide starting points for analysis. But despite the passage of time, despite technological advances, despite Maria's unwavering advocacy and the community's continued support, Jacob Martinez remained as absent as the moment his cell phone had gone silent on that October night. The desert had kept its secrets for nearly a decade, but technology was about to reveal that even the most carefully buried truth could eventually surface through the patient application of tools that hadn't existed when the mystery began. March 2024, nearly 12 years after Jacob Martinez vanished into the high desert night, Detective Lisa Chen sat in her cramped office at APD headquarters, surrounded by cold case files that seemed to multiply despite her efforts to resolve them. The morning light streaming through dusty windows illuminated stacks of folders, representing dozens of families still waiting for answers, still hoping for closure that might never come. Her computer monitor displayed an email that would change everything. A message from the FBI's Digital Evidence Recovery Unit about advanced GPS data extraction capabilities. The breakthrough emerged from technology that simply hadn't existed in. Modern forensic specialists had developed techniques for recovering GPS tracking data from cell phone towers and service providers' backup systems, information that had been considered permanently lost during the original investigation. What seemed like digital silence 12 years ago might actually contain recoverable data preserved in archived systems that investigators were only now learning to access. Agent Patricia Morris, the FBI consultant who had reviewed Jacob's case years earlier, contacted Detective Chen with news that seemed too good to believe after so many disappointments. A pilot program for advanced GPS data recovery was accepting cold cases that met specific technical criteria. Cases involving cell phone signals that had disappeared during specific time periods in specific geographical areas, where original investigations had been thorough but inconclusive. Jacob's case met every requirement perfectly. His cell phone signal had vanished precisely at 10:52 p.m. on October 15, 2012, after following his expected route along Central Avenue. The 5-minute gap that had frustrated investigators for over a decade might actually contain recoverable information, hidden in server backups and archived databases that technology companies had maintained for legal and regulatory compliance purposes. The data recovery process required months of legal procedures, court orders, and technical coordination between multiple agencies and private companies. Cell phone service providers, initially resistant to sharing archived information, eventually complied with federal warrants that mandated their cooperation. Verizon, Jacob's carrier, discovered that backup systems had preserved tower ping data that hadn't been accessible through conventional means. Detective Chen called Maria Martinez on a Thursday morning in June 2024, her voice carefully controlled as she delivered news that might represent either a breakthrough or another crushing disappointment. "Miss Martinez, I need you to understand that this might not lead anywhere definitive, but we've recovered additional GPS data from Jacob's phone. We know where he went during those missing 5 minutes." The recovered data painted a precise picture of Jacob's final journey. His phone had continued pinging towers after 10:52 p.m., but the signals had been routed through a cellular repeater system that hadn't been included in the original investigation. The technology, used to boost signals in areas with poor coverage, had created a data trail that investigators hadn't known to search for 12 years earlier. Jacob's Honda Civic had deviated from his normal route home, turning south on a residential street called Desert View Drive, then east onto a dead-end road that terminated at an abandoned construction site. The GPS coordinates were specific enough to identify the exact location where his phone signal had finally died, not from running out of battery, but from being deliberately disabled or destroyed. The location shocked investigators, who had searched the area repeatedly during the original investigation. Desert View Drive led to a partially completed housing development that had been abandoned during the 2008 economic recession. Empty lots, partially built foundations, and construction debris created a landscape that seemed thoroughly examined, yet somehow had hidden its secrets for over a decade. Detective Chen assembled a new investigative team that combined seasoned cold case specialists with recent academy graduates trained in modern forensic techniques. The team included cadaver dogs with handlers experienced in desert searches, ground-penetrating radar operators, and forensic anthropologists equipped to process scenes that might have been disturbed by weather, animals, or human activity over many years. The search of the construction site began at dawn on July 8, 2024, almost 12 years to the day after Jacob's disappearance had been officially classified as a cold case. News crews gathered at the perimeter, their cameras capturing images that would soon shock the Albuquerque community and provide answers that had seemed impossible after so many years of silence. Ground-penetrating radar detected anomalies beneath what appeared to be naturally settled earth, near the foundation of a house that had never been completed. The electromagnetic signatures suggested both metallic objects and organic material buried approximately 4 feet below the surface, at depths consistent with deliberate concealment rather than natural occurrence. The excavation proceeded with archaeological precision, each layer of soil carefully removed and sifted for evidence that might explain how Jacob Martinez and his Honda Civic had vanished so completely from the world of the living. Crime scene photographers documented every stage of the process, creating a visual record that would eventually support legal proceedings, while providing closure to a family that had waited nearly half a lifetime for answers. What they discovered would not only solve Jacob's disappearance, but also reveal a betrayal so shocking that it would force the Albuquerque community to question everything they thought they knew about trust, friendship, and the hidden darkness that can lurk behind familiar faces. Maria Martinez stood at the edge of the crime scene perimeter, her hands clutched around the rosary she had carried every day since October 6. After 12 years of lighting candles, organizing searches, and maintaining hope against overwhelming odds, she was finally going to learn the truth about what had happened to her son during those 5 missing minutes that had stretched into more than a decade of unanswered questions. July 8, 2024, 2:47 p.m. The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the excavation site as Detective Chen's radio crackled with the words that would forever change the Martinez family's understanding of their son's disappearance. "We've got human remains." The ground-penetrating radar had been accurate, 4 feet beneath the sandy soil of the abandoned construction site. Forensic specialists uncovered what appeared to be a shallow grave containing both human bones and twisted metal that matched the description of a tomb. The forensic anthropologist, Dr. Sarah Reeves, worked with meticulous care to preserve evidence that had been buried for nearly 12 years. The desert's dry climate had acted as a natural preservative, maintaining organic material that might have deteriorated in more humid environments. Fragments of clothing, personal effects, and most importantly, dental remains that could be definitively matched to Jacob Martinez through his dental records. But the discovery that would shock the Albuquerque community to its core wasn't the confirmation of Jacob's death after 12 years. Many had privately accepted that possibility. The shock came from evidence found alongside the remains. A construction company ID badge belonging to Tom Bradley, the retired contractor who had become Maria Martinez's closest confidant, most dedicated search volunteer, and trusted friend during the darkest period of her life. Detective Chen stared at the plastic badge, its edges cracked from years underground, but its photograph and identification still clearly visible. Tom Bradley, 68 years old in 2012, employee N347 of Sandia Construction Company. The same Tom Bradley who had organized search parties, comforted Maria during countless vigils, and spent countless hours helping look for a young man he had murdered and buried in a location he knew investigators would never think to search thoroughly. The investigation's focus shifted immediately to Bradley, whose decades-old criminal record revealed a pattern of behavior that had been sealed due to the passage of time and his apparent rehabilitation. In 1987, 25 years before Jacob's disappearance, Bradley had been convicted of assault with a deadly weapon following a bar fight that had nearly killed another patron. The charges had been reduced through plea bargaining, and his subsequent clean record had allowed the conviction to fade into bureaucratic obscurity. More disturbing were the psychological profiles that emerged through interviews with Bradley's former co-workers, neighbors, and acquaintances. Multiple sources described a man with an explosive temper that he carefully concealed behind a facade of grandfatherly kindness. His wife of 40 years had died suddenly in 2010, officially from natural causes, but now subject to renewed investigation. His adult children lived in other states and had minimal contact with him, a fact that had seemed like normal family dynamics, but now suggested something more sinister. Bradley's construction background provided him with intimate knowledge of Albuquerque's geography, including abandoned developments, remote locations, and areas where evidence could be concealed indefinitely. His familiarity with excavation equipment, burial techniques, and soil composition had enabled him to create a grave that had successfully hidden Jacob's remains for over a decade, despite multiple professional searches of the area. The timeline reconstruction painted a horrifying picture of premeditation and manipulation. Bradley had been a regular customer at La Cocina Familiar for months before Jacob's disappearance, carefully establishing himself as a harmless elderly patron who appreciated Jacob's attentive service. Security footage from the restaurant, preserved in digital archives, showed Bradley studying Jacob's schedule, his routine, and his personality traits that could be exploited. On the night of October 15, 2012, Bradley had positioned himself along Jacob's route home, using his knowledge of the young man's habits and preferences to engineer an encounter that would appear coincidental. The recovered GPS data suggested that Jacob had stopped his car, possibly to help someone he recognized and trusted, someone who had eaten at his section every Friday for months and had never shown any sign of hostility or dangerous behavior. What happened during those fatal 5 minutes remained partially mysterious, but forensic evidence suggested that Jacob had been killed quickly, possibly with a construction tool that Bradley carried in his truck. The motive appeared to be opportunistic rather than specifically targeted. Jacob had simply been available, vulnerable, and trusting enough to stop for someone he considered a friendly regular customer. The manipulation that followed Jacob's murder demonstrated a level of psychological sophistication that chilled investigators. Bradley had inserted himself into the search efforts immediately, positioning himself as Maria's supporter and confidant, while secretly knowing exactly where her son's body lay buried. He had comforted her through years of grief, attended vigils where she mourned her missing child, and helped organize searches of areas he knew contained no evidence. The level of cruelty involved in this deception is almost incomprehensible. Detective Chen told assembled media outside APD headquarters, "This suspect didn't just kill Jacob Martinez, he tortured his family psychologically for 12 years, pretending to help search for a young man he had murdered and buried. He attended their vigils, comforted their grief, and gained their trust while knowing exactly what had happened to their son." Maria Martinez's reaction to the betrayal was captured by news cameras. As she left the crime scene, her face showed not relief at finally having answers, but devastation at learning that her son's killer had been manipulating her grief for over a decade. The man she had trusted, confided in, and considered a friend had been responsible for the very tragedy that had brought them together. Bradley's arrest occurred at his modest home in Albuquerque's foothills, where investigators found a basement workshop containing tools, naps, and what appeared to be trophies from other crimes that had never been reported or solved. His shocked neighbors described a quiet man who kept to himself, maintained his property meticulously, and had never shown signs of the psychological darkness that had apparently motivated decades of hidden violence. "I served him coffee every morning for 8 years," said the cashier at a nearby convenience store. "He always said please and thank you, asked about my kids, and seemed like the nicest old man you could imagine." How do you reconcile that with someone who could kill a kid and then spend 12 years pretending to help find him? The community's reaction combined relief at finally having answers with horror at the betrayal that had been hidden in plain sight. The man who had become a symbol of community support, who had organized search parties and comforted grieving families, had been the very predator they were searching for. The revelation forced residents to question their assumptions about trust, safety, and their ability to recognize danger even when it sat beside them at vigils and community meetings. Bradley's psychological evaluation, conducted while he was held without bail, revealed a personality disorder that allowed him to compartmentalize his actions completely. He could murder someone, and then convincingly play the role of concerned community member, feeling no guilt or internal conflict about the deception. To him, the search efforts and grief counseling were simply additional opportunities to exercise control and manipulation over his victims' families. The case would eventually reveal that Jacob Martinez was not Bradley's only victim, but perhaps his most psychologically sophisticated crime. The 12 years of manipulation that followed the murder represented a masterclass in predatory behavior that would be studied by criminologists and law enforcement for decades to come. October 15, 2024. Exactly 12 years after Jacob Martinez had driven into the desert night and never returned home, his family finally laid him to rest in a ceremony that drew thousands of supporters from throughout New Mexico and beyond. The morning sun painted the Sandia Mountains gold and purple, the same colors Jacob had seen during his last sunrise, now witnessed by a community that had never forgotten his story or abandoned hope for resolution. Tom Bradley, 79 years old and confined to a wheelchair due to declining health, pleaded guilty to first-degree murder to avoid the death penalty that prosecutors had been prepared to seek. His confession, delivered in a monotone voice that showed no emotion or remorse, revealed that Jacob had indeed stopped to help what he believed was a stranded motorist. A decision that had cost him his life, but demonstrated the compassion and kindness that everyone who knew him remembered most clearly. The legal proceedings moved swiftly once Bradley entered his plea. District Attorney Robert Sanchez, who had monitored the case for over a decade, expressed satisfaction that justice had finally been served, though he acknowledged that no legal outcome could restore what the Martinez family had lost or compensate them for 12 years of psychological torture at the hands of their son's killer. "This case represents both the best and worst of human nature," Sanchez told the packed courtroom during Bradley's sentencing hearing. Jacob Martinez died because he was willing to help someone he thought needed assistance. Tom Bradley exploited that compassion, and then spent 12 years manipulating the grief of Jacob's family while pretending to search for a young man he had murdered in cold blood. Bradley received a sentence of life in prison without possibility of parole, a punishment that satisfied the legal system's requirements for justice, while providing the Martinez family with certainty that Jacob's killer would never again have the opportunity to harm others or manipulate their grief. He died in prison less than 6 months later, his death attributed to natural causes, but mourned by no one. The investigation that Bradley's confession had triggered revealed a pattern of suspicious deaths and disappearances connected to construction sites where he had worked over several decades. Cold case investigators in New Mexico, Colorado, and Arizona reopened files on unsolved murders that might be connected to Bradley's access to remote locations and burial sites. While definitive connections proved difficult to establish after so many years, The evidence suggested that Jacob Martinez was one of multiple victims whose deaths had been concealed through Bradley's expertise with excavation and site preparation. Maria Martinez, now 58 years old and permanently changed by 12 years of uncertainty, followed by devastating betrayal, chose to focus on healing rather than continued anger. She established a foundation in Jacob's memory that provided resources for families of missing persons, funded advanced forensic technology for police departments, and supported research into the psychological manipulation tactics used by predators who insert themselves into victim families' support systems. "I can't get back the 12 years that man stole from us," she said during a press conference announcing the foundation's creation. "But I can make sure that other families don't have to endure what we experienced. Jacob's death will save other lives if we use what we've learned to protect people who find themselves in similar situations." The Jacob Martinez Foundation partnered with law enforcement agencies throughout the Southwest to develop protocols for identifying and screening volunteers who insert themselves into missing persons cases. Bradley's manipulation tactics became case studies taught at police academies and victim advocacy training programs, helping investigators and families recognize the warning signs of predatory behavior disguised as helpfulness. Sarah Chen, now married with 2 young children, returned to Albuquerque for Jacob's funeral and chose to speak publicly about their relationship for the first time in 12 years. Her remarks, delivered through tears but with a steady voice, painted a picture of young love interrupted by violence but never diminished by time or tragedy. "Jacob would have been an amazing father," she told the gathered mourners. "He had so much love to give, so many dreams he wanted to achieve. Tom Bradley didn't just kill Jacob, he killed the family we would have had, the life we would have built together, and the happiness we deserve to share." But Jacob's memory will live on through the lives his foundation saves and the families who find closure because of what we learned from this terrible experience. La Cocina Familiar established a permanent scholarship fund in Jacob's name, providing tuition assistance for hospitality students at the University of New Mexico, while maintaining Table 12 as a memorial space where customers could leave flowers, notes, and remembrances. The restaurant became an unofficial pilgrimage site for families dealing with missing persons cases, a place where they could find community support and understanding from others who had experienced similar losses. Detective Lisa Chen, promoted to captain of the Cold Case Division, largely due to her success in resolving Jacob's case, used the advanced GPS recovery techniques that had cracked the investigation to solve 17 additional missing persons cases within 2 years. The technology that had seemed impossibly futuristic in 2012 became standard procedure for cold case investigations, providing closure for dozens of families who had waited years or decades for answers. The broader impact of Jacob's case extended far beyond Albuquerque's city limits. The investigation techniques developed during the search for his killer were shared with law enforcement agencies nationwide, contributing to the resolution of similar cases across the country. The psychological profiles of predators who manipulate victim families became standard reference material for FBI behavioral analysts and victim advocates. Miguel Sandoval, now head chef and part owner of La Cocina Familiar, continued training new servers with stories of Jacob's professionalism and genuine care for customers. These stories became part of the restaurant's culture, teaching young employees that hospitality work involved serving not just food, but human dignity, compassion, and respect for the sacred trust that customers placed in their care. The community healing process proved as important as the legal resolution. Albuquerque residents had lived for 12 years, knowing that someone among them was responsible for Jacob's disappearance, creating an atmosphere of suspicion and unease that had gradually poisoned neighborhood relationships and community trust. Bradley's arrest and confession allowed the healing process to begin, though the betrayal he had perpetrated left psychological scars that would require years to fully address. As the sun set behind the Sandia Mountains on the anniversary of Jacob's death, Maria Martinez lit a candle in her window one final time, not as a beacon calling her son home, but as a memorial flame, honoring his memory and celebrating the resolution that had seemed impossible for so many years. The light flickered steadily through the desert night, visible to neighbors who understood its significance and found comfort in knowing that even the darkest mysteries could eventually yield their secrets to persistence, advanced technology, and the unwavering love of families who refuse to accept defeat. Jacob Martinez had been gone for 12 years, but his story would continue inspiring others for generations to come. A reminder that justice, though sometimes delayed, could still be achieved through the patient application of evolving investigative techniques and the refusal to abandon hope even when hope seemed foolish. In the high desert country of New Mexico, where secrets could be buried deep but never permanently hidden, truth had finally emerged from the darkness to provide the closure that transforms grief into purpose and tragedy into triumph over evil.